The modern gaming landscape is littered with more than a few buggy and, frankly, garbage releases. Cyberpunk, Fallout 76, Payday 3, among many, many others. And frankly, this just goes to show the modern dumpster fire state of the gaming wasteland that we currently reside in. Of course, this isn't accounting for the many good, even great releases of the last few years, but those are the exception rather than the norm. There are very few companies consistently putting out finished and good games as of today, which is really just kinda sad. I mean, off the top of my head, I can think of 2, maybe 3, and even then there's a little exception to both of their catalogs. But, for the most part anyways, these problems generally reside in the AAA scene. Indie developers have generally avoided falling prey to the bad choices often made by executives who only want to get the product out of the door by the next big holiday. Over time, the indie scene has practically taken over in terms of gaming, at least somewhat. It's rare that I'm ever hyped for something that comes out from a big household name developer, but I have found myself getting genuinely excited for some of the smaller indie projects that I've found. It's nice to see a project led by a small team, or hell, even one guy with such a focus. The unbroken creative vision spurred by genuine creative passion and interest for the gaming medium. Despite all of this, there are some rather large names in the indie gaming scene. But the one in which this video is focusing on is the widely loved New Blood. If you're at all in the indie scene, these guys are a pretty common name, especially for those interested in FPS games. These guys practically kickstarted the modern retro shooter renaissance with one of their first releases, Dusk, a game in which I also have a video on, if that's something you're more interested in learning about. I'll put a link in one of the cards in the corner right now. Gotta love that YouTube magic. On top of the countless FPS games they've published, they've also had a hand in more than a few immersive sims, a genre that I really just can't seem to escape as of late. Okay, well, really they only have 2 real ones, Fallen Aces and Gloomwood. Fallen Aces is being developed by Trey Powell and Jason Bond, and Gloomwood is the brainchild of several folks, but specifically Dylan Rogers, with some help of David Szymanski, you know, the guy who made Dusk and all this other shit. Both of these games are immersive sims, but they are also equally unfinished. Fallen Ace's first episode released a few months back in June, while Gloomwood released all the way back in September of 2022 and has steadily been getting updated and amended over the course of the last few years. I have taken the liberty of combining these 2 games into one giant video as to both artificially lengthen its runtime and because both games share the same genre and the same developer, really. With that being said though, this video is kind of lopsided, since one of these games has vastly more content than the other, and if you looked at the chapters in this video you could probably gather which one that is. Regardless, I figured I'd cover Fallen Aces first since, you know, it's well, it's new, meaning that this is one of the few instances where I get to cover something that isn't over a decade old. With all of that out of the way, let's just jump right into things. We begin in the year 1930-something. Right off the bat, you can just see how goddamn stylish this game is. It's rare to see games do even properly cel-shaded graphics anymore, but this is something truly unprecedented. Not only are all of the cutscenes between levels entirely hand-drawn with some genuinely great artwork, but all of the textures and sprites are all hand-drawn as well. It gives the game a truly unique and interesting look that I can't claim to have seen anywhere else. Regardless, this opening cutscene doesn't really show us a whole lot, besides showing us mayoral candidate Victor Waltz almost getting assassinated by this goon right here. And due to this game's setting, I'm officially allowed to use the word goon to describe every enemy in the game and not feel weird about it. Our first level spits us into the shoes of Detective Mike Thane, a former boxer with a drinking problem and a degree in bullshit artistry. A perfect leading man if I've ever seen one. After falling out of bed and fixing our stuck door, we can head out into our office, munch on some snacks, and read up on our current case. This one turns out to be quite a doozy. A missing persons case involving one Alexia Price. A veteran of a supposed border war, she returned from the service and co-founded the Aces, alongside Victor Waltz. These guys were apparently some kind of crime-fighting organization formed to aid the police in their crackdown against organized crime in the city of Umbra. More of a Watchmen situation over the Justice League, though, as besides being mooks in costumes, they didn't have any superpowers or anything. Well, at least not yet they don't. I'm sure in future episodes there's going to be some kind of crazy bullshit superpowers happening, but that's besides the point. The attached letter from our detective friend Pete doesn't do much besides outlining some of the other details about the case. He does tell us that a new street gang called the Glasshearts are seemingly involved, though, as is evidenced by the hitman who tried to ice Waltz during his speech. Waltz himself seemingly does have some pretty close ties to the case as a whole, although these plot points don't really go anywhere, at least not in this current build of the game. Still though, the thing that woke us up to begin with was the phone, so we ought to answer that.
Hey, Bill. About rent.
Listen very carefully. There are men coming to kill you, and unless you do precisely what I say...
Oh, wise guy, huh? Look, I don't have time for prank calls, and I don't appreciate...
Stop talking and pay attention, Mike. I don't know how long you've got, so you need to move. Promise.
Despite Mike's initial apprehension, we'll say, the guy on the other end turns out to be telling the truth, as shortly after he hangs up, some goons politely knock on the door.
Glassjaw sends his regards, you piece of shit!
Well, not really, but you get the idea. This gives us the first taste of the game's melee combat, which in terms of beat-em-ups is pretty standard. You can block, perform a heavy attack, kick, and these really funny finishing moves, which ended up being one of my favorite mechanics in the game.
Get over here.
They also give you a little bit of health back too, which is pretty nice. These 3 goons went down pretty effortlessly though. I know these guys are your run-of-the-mill starting chumps, but I am playing on the hardest difficulty, and I even decided to handicap myself by not using any of my weapons. You see, even on the highest difficulty, this game is incredibly easy. Even if you're not that good at beat-em-ups, you're probably going to be able to go through this with very little hassle, a problem that is only further exacerbated due to the amount of high-powered guns you can get your hands on in later levels. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Speaking of guns, before we can leave Mike's apartment, we can open his safe with the combination, what? It's not 451? Oh, I get it. You tried to be cheeky, huh? Inside Mike's safe, we can find some cash and a good old 38 snubby with a spare speed loader. This presents us with a difficult choice. Well, not difficult at this stage in the game, but such choices will be harder to make later on. If we want to take both the gun and the spare ammo, we have to leave behind 2 of our items. This is because Mike can only carry a paltry 3 items at once in his inventory. Every storable item in the game, including ammunition and healing items, takes up one of these slots. So you really have to pick and choose what you want to take when it comes to creating a loadout. But with our gear collected, our only goal is to get to our buddy Pete's apartment on the other side of town. Of course, the trip isn't without peril. The goons that raided our apartment have infested most of the neighboring streets, and they all want us dead. Besides the standard unarmed punch-em goons, there are lead pipe-wielding mooks who are a little tankier and can do some serious damage if not tended to quickly. Thankfully, with our Saturday night special, we can take these guys out with relatively little hassle. This game features a similar dynamic aiming system to Deus Ex, although it is a little less extreme in this case. This can be tempered by smoking some cigarettes, which gives you 90 seconds of perfect aim. This is because, well, come on, it's the fucking 30s. Smoking was not only cool, but you could literally do it anywhere. Gameplay-wise, this level is pretty open-ended. Again, our only goal is to get to the other side of town and link up with Pete, but getting there is entirely up to the player's discretion. There are multiple paths, plenty of side areas, and a whole suite of secret caches for you to stumble upon. Generally, these secrets in this game aren't super hard to come by. I mean, I'm not great at finding these things, and even I only managed to find 50% on average. Even still, though, I was absolutely swimming in loot. This makes the 3-slot limit sting even more. One of the first secrets that I find includes both a nail gun, which is the game's weakest range weapon, and a couple of Molotovs. At this point, I'm still carrying the 38 snub and its spare speed loader, so I have to leave behind something if I really want to take any of this good stuff with me. Really, I am just nitpicking here. All of this was likely done in the name of balance. If you could carry around ammo, healing items, throwables, and a bunch of weapons, the game would be even easier than it already is. It can get a little tedious when you have to run back and forth to previously discovered secret areas to make the best use out of all the tools that the game gives you, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not a huge problem. Besides, I can see there being some kind of inventory upgrade in a future episode, but maybe that's just me. The secret areas in which you find all of these nice things, though, are themselves pretty fun to find. They range from simple out-of-the-way pickups to multi-step events that require you to connect the dots across the entire map. For instance, there is a secret in this level that is alluded to by a note found in the safe above the comic shop. It tells us that there's a key to an apartment with a safe in the dumpster behind the coffee shop, but that's not where things end. You see, the safe itself is locked with the 3-number code that we don't yet have. To find it, you have to look in the local paper and use the racing data to then unlock the safe. This is one of the more simplistic examples. Hell, the game even tells you that the code can be found in the paper's racing column in case you didn't already find said paper. And the safe itself doesn't even contain any gear, just a bunch of money. Money itself is, let's face it, kind of worthless in this game. There are only a handful of things you can spend it on, and since you'll build up a pretty sizable backlog of cash early on, you never even have to think about buying things. Anyways, on the other side of town, we can finally reach Pete. Well, what's left of him anyways. Mike makes the mistake of turning his back on the one entrance to this room, thus leading to him getting bonked and captured, and then ending the level. We are kidnapped and taken to the docks by the same goons we previously killed more than 24 of in the previous level. Why do I even try writing script? Why don't I just use fucking AI? It's probably better. Before this one can properly break us in, he stopped by... This is Glassjaw, the game's current main villain. He's the leader of the Glasshearts, and he and Mike have some kind of history with one another. Again, this is another plot point that isn't resolved in this episode. And hell, after this encounter with him, we don't see him in person during this episode a single time. Still though, like any good comic book villain, he wants to kill Mike in the most unfathomably stupid way possible, as to make it easy for him to be saved by the other main character. We'll get to know him a little bit more in a second. For right now though, we swim our way out of the basin and into this warehouse where we're contacted by our savior, Nightwave, a former member of the Aces who previously warned us of the raid in our apartment. He enlists our help in getting us out of here. The only way out of the docks is via this drawbridge here, which is currently in the process of being raised. The main controls are on the other side of the harbor, and this whole place is crawling with mooks, so we really have our work cut out for us here. Once we get the bridge down, though, he wants us to circle back here so he can give us the full rundown on what's actually going on. This level is probably the best that the game has to offer. Not to say that everything after this is bad, not by any means, it's just that this level is a perfect blend of everything. It's incredibly wide and spacious, very Life of the Party-esque, with its giant open sandbox that can be tackled from nearly any angle. Unlike that level, though, this one involves very little of my brain power. There are plenty of firearms to be found, some of which including a Tommy gun and a sniper rifle with plenty of ammo. The scoped repeater is the most powerful weapon in the game, easily capable of killing any enemy with one shot. And if you find this vantage point nearby with even more ammo to spare, you can kill basically half the enemies in the level without even alerting them. This is even with the new enemies that this level introduces. Knife goons, who are basically just pipe guys who spec into a different part of the tech tree, armed goons, which are just black sweatered standard goons who carry 38 revolvers, and finally, snipers, who are easily the most dangerous common enemies in the game. You do get plenty of supplies to sniper duel them out of existence, and Nightwave is able to snipe a few of them if we give him our blessing. Still though, this level is mostly just one big gauntlet between where we start and the control room to raise the bridge. There are several approaches to getting to the other side, the one I take being the goofiest one. You can for some reason tightrope walk your way across this wire that is barely able to hold birds. Really the only part of the game that stays consistently challenging is the melee combat, mainly due to the mild amount of unpredictability that the AI has when being faced at close range. In terms of melee weapons, it's a kitchen sink. Pipes, nail boards, fire axes, switchblades, the staples, but there are a few unique ones. Frying pans, straight razors, even an acoustic guitar which can be used to lure out enemies by strumming the open strings. Really though, you'll probably be relying on your fists for most of the game's melee combat. Firstly, because you don't need to have an inventory slot for them, you can just holster your weapon and start punching away if you need to. And secondly, because they don't have any durability. Every other weapon does, even the firearms, which you can use to bash enemies with. Anyways, on the other side of the docks we can...
Pretty boy, get over it, bastard. You fellas are starting to piss me off.
Oh fuck you, I could have taken care of that. I still had half a Tommy gun drum of 45 ammo. Still, Nightwave and Mike finally meet face to face for the first time. He tells us that the mob is involved with Victor Waltz, and they don't exactly appreciate us muddying their business. Nightwave tells us that someone out there is targeting former Aces members, including Waltz and himself. Although at this point it's probably too late for Waltz. What appealed to Nightwave about Mike though is his skill set, because apparently being a drunken detective who happens to be good at beating people up makes him a valuable asset or something like that. So the two form an alliance for the time being. I mean, I guess I can understand it. Mike has killed somewhere along the lines of like 100 people in the last 24 hours. So I guess it is safe to say that at the very least he's an effective blunt force instrument. Anyways, the pair have to vacate the premises quickly as some more mob enforcers are on their way to give chase. During said chase, Nightwave gets clipped and the car completely breaks down. We were planning on heading towards Waltz's manor in the countryside, but if we go on foot, it could take hours and we don't have that kind of time. When we finally get to a safe spot, Nightwave is able to contact an old associate of his who can hopefully hook us up with some wheels. He owns a junkyard close to the subway station on Marigold Street, so we take the train down there to meet him. Of course, the place is being besieged by the mob, so we have to deal with that before he can give us a free ride. Speaking of the mob, the local Benedetto crime family is currently in the middle of a brutal turf war with the Glasshearts, so expect more goons than usual. This level starts off in the train platform before spitting us out in the heart of Switchblade City. While the previous city map had some civvies roaming around, this place is almost exclusively populated by monsters. I mean fucking mobsters, not monsters. This isn't fucking Doom. This level is also the only one in the episode set during the day, which does act as a nice change of scenery. The first half of the level is basically a straight shot to Blake's junkyard. Again, this map is also, like the others, very, very easy. Almost more so than the previous one. It has another one of those multi-step secret areas. the first part of which can be found on the roof of this building overlooking the junkyard. There's a good-sized stash of rifle ammo here, but no rifle. The rifle is in another apartment down the street, which in and of itself is another secret area. If we bring it back to the sniper's perch, we can get basically enough ammo to dink every single enemy in the junkyard without even setting foot in it. That's lame as hell though, so I decide to head in guns blazing. Smoking some cigarettes and running in with the repeater is actually a viable strategy, since the repeater is one of the few weapons able to obtain perfect accuracy, so hip-firing this thing is actually doable. Blake has rigged the whole junkyard with tripwire bombs, which can prove to be a little problematic for us. There are actually a bunch of cool environmental traps here, but since, you can just fucking snipe and shoot everything, it's not super helpful. Anyways, Blake thanks us for the help, and tells us to hunker down as there's more goons on the way. Since I decided to drag all of the good weapons here through several trips back and forth across the level, I was able to amass a pretty good arsenal. Hell, I don't even think I had to drop a ranged weapon for the entire fucking fight, nor did I take any damage. Blake, on the other hand, well, he did get a few scratches. I mean, I really couldn't stop that. He's not entirely defenseless, though. He's got a piece and he's pretty damn accurate with it. But either way, after a few waves of goons, Blake tells us to get out of here and gives us the key to the shed which contains this sweet ride. After picking up Nightwave, we head out into the countryside to Waltz's gigantic manor. The place is under investigation by the police after Waltz got. After Mike and Nightwave shoot the shit for a while.
Pretty good. More piece?
No, I brought my own. Sorry. Did you want some?
I'm good, Rufus.
Some more cops roll up, but of course, something is wrong.
That bacon don't smell right to me.
Shit. Looks like we're out of the frying pan.
And into the fire.
The goons beat us to it. Now we're in for a hostile takeover rather than a standard B&E. Making things even more difficult is the fact that Nightwave wants us to be as pacifist as possible. That's right, for the first half of this level, we really can't kill anyone.
Worry about that later. For now, try and pacify all of them. We don't need more corpses lying around the crime scene.
Yeah, that kinda makes sense. Really, this is the only level that's actually kind of challenging, although that's only because of the fact that you can't go in guns blazing. Even then, though, Nightwave gives you a tranquilizer gun and a blackjack for enhanced thievery. And yes, I mean thievery.
Nice. Needed some booze money.
We're here for clues, not valuables.
Anyways, though, the main goal of this level is to find out what really happened to Waltz, which means that Mike finally gets to do some proper detective stuff. There's no mini-games or any stupid shit like that here either. Mike just finds a clue and then relays what he sees to Nightwave. When all of them are added up, things point to there being one hell of a scuffle here. For fuck's sake, Waltz got impaled on the wall of his own bedroom. At this point in the game's development, we don't fully know who did this, and really the only apparent candidate is Glassjaw, but we'll see how long that lasts. While snooping around, we can find...
Would you look at that? A secret room.
Well, not that, but I'm sure the shotgun will come in handy soon anyways. No, what we can really find, though, is the key to Waltz's office.
Huh. Nice self-portrait. How pretentious can you get?
If you thought that was pretentious, then just wait till you see the fact that this entire room is just a fucking elevator to a secret underground superhero lair. Yeah, Waltz was also a member of the Aces on top of being the guy who founded it. Well, at least that's what he wants people to think. We can find a picture of Waltz in costume standing with Alexia Price, the person who we were initially contracted to find. Nightwave tells us that she was the one that initially created the idea of creating this group to begin with, but Waltz took credit. Because, fuck her, I guess, I don't know. Regardless, the real prize here can be found in this safe. It's one giant case file detailing all sorts of good stuff, mainly the fact that the rest of the Aces may be a little less innocent than previously thought. On our way out of the Ace Cave, we're contacted by none other than Glassjaw. This line is supposed to be a closed circuit between Nightwave and I, so Glassjaw somehow managing to contact us is a little more than concerning.
Got this gizmo off a pretty young thing that's been snooping around my nightclub. But she ain't up to much talking right now.
Nice. I needed some booze money.
Well, I think I know where we're going next. Thankfully, for the rest of the level, our rules of engagement have been loosened, allowing us to make good use out of that shotgun from before. Once we carve a path back to the car, we begin heading in the direction of a nightclub owned by Glassjaw. He wants the files that we collected in Waltz's safe, and in exchange he'll turn Dahlia loose. She's Alexia Price's daughter and was working undercover at the nightclub that we're heading to. And as you can imagine, we're going in to rescue her. This is the final level of the episode, and it may look familiar, and that's because of the fact that the demo that released for this game a while back was a slice of this level. Before we can actually get to the club, we have to contend with a battalion of goons, including some Tommy gun wielding mooks and some snipers. This is probably the most densely packed level in the game, since all of the content is packed into one central building. The place itself is just also pretty nicely designed too. A nice pool room, as in billiards, not an actual swimming pool, but you get the idea. A smoking lounge, a few bars with special tonics that can make you move faster and give you increased melee damage. It's pretty good stuff, although you'll probably end up killing every single person in the level in one room, because of the fact that enemy awareness in this game spreads bizarrely. There is also a secondary objective for us to grab Dahlia's black book, which is hidden behind the mirror in the dressing room. Our main goal is, again, to just find Dahlia herself, and to do so we need to take care of the owner of the establishment, Matches Malone. Yeah, Glassjaw ain't the main big bad here. We only get this schmuck who appears here and nowhere else. Kinda sad, but whatever. He does have a unique finisher animation though, which is actually pretty cool. I love little details like that.
Get over here.
Hey, thanks for coming to the party.
On his desk is the key to the torture dungeon, and in said dungeon is Dahlia herself. She's still alive, thankfully, although she ain't exactly in good shape. Well, looks like we're going to be doing this the hard way. With the amount of ways there are in and out of the club, things aren't super challenging, but they do try to debate you with another Tommy gun mook and a sniper goon right near the end. Once we're back to the car, though, we floor it out of there and the episode comes to a close. Well, only after we get a teaser for what's to come with this fucking Dr. Doom looking ass guy. Regardless, that is all that Fallen Aces has to offer at the time of writing this video. If you couldn't tell, I like it quite a bit. The only real complaints that I have, if you can even call them complaints, are the fact that the game is too easy, and at this stage it's really short. This is my second full playthrough, but even then, this episode took me a little over 2 hours, which I'd still say is worth the price. For only 13-ish bucks and even less on sale, it's not a terrible deal. Needless to say though, I am thoroughly excited for what comes next for this game, even if it takes another fucking 45 years for new stuff to come out. Anyways, now we get to do something completely different. Yeah, very different. If the last game was primarily combat focused, then this game is the complete opposite. A mostly stealth focused game with some basic forms of combat in case you need to save your ass. For this video, I played on the hard difficulty, which is Full Moon. If you're a Thief veteran or you already have experience with these kinds of games, then this is probably a good skill to start with. Blood Moon I don't really want to touch on. It's basically just this mode, but more difficult, and this difficulty is already pretty challenging. On top of that, saving requires the use of wax cylinders. Yeah, you can only ever save at phonographs that are dotted around the map, and now you have to save with an expendable resource, similarly to the early Resident Evil games. I already have some choice words for the save system, but we'll get to that when we get into the actual meat and potatoes of this game. Anyways, though, let's just get right into things. In this game, we take control of an unnamed doctor sent to the city of Gloomwood to do, something. I don't believe that it's explicitly stated why we're here, but then again, I don't think I found every note and piece of lore, so maybe it's just my bad. Regardless, we're captured by some of the less than friendly locals and thrown into this fish pit. They don't kill us, mind you, as it seems they've been hired to deliver us to someone. Again, like Fallen Aces, we don't have all of the answers, and we likely won't for a long time. So if you leave this video with some unanswered questions, then I really can't help you there. But of course, because this is a video game, we have to get freed. And we're freed by this lovely gentleman, who gives us a nice light-catching ring and then proceeds to fart magic his way out of here and open the gate. Without any weapons or equipment, we're forced to sneak past these first few guards. The special light ring the stranger gave us does make things much easier though, as it shows when we're visible. That won't help us with this next guy though. Luckily, the fish people here happen to all be severe alcoholics, so we can easily distract him with a bottle, letting us grab the key and get into the generator room. This spits us out in front of the first phonograph in the game, as well as our first weapon, the cane sword. And with a proper weapon collected, as well as our inventory suitcase, we can finally begin our mission. The stranger told us to get to the lighthouse, and with no other leads, we don't have any other options. The fish people certainly don't make things easier for us, though. They're packed in here pretty densely, so we'll have to be quiet if we want any chance of survival. Stealth, as you can imagine, is the approach that the game incentivizes you to take. Enemies, even on their own, are pretty powerful. Even just one guy can take you down pretty easily if they're not dealt with properly. The fish people come in two different variants, the huntsman and the woodsman. One carries a gun, the other carries an axe. Pretty self-explanatory. Of course, the ones with guns are more dangerous, but the woodsman can deal a lot of damage if not dealt with. Also, I'm not calling them fish people because they're made of fish or anything, it's because they have a weird fixation with it. You know, they're in a fucking fish packing plant, it's just kind of a weird thing they seem to like. They actually seem to be some kind of weird cult, and if I had a nickel for every time a game starts with getting captured by a dangerous cult, I'd, have enough nickels to buy probably nothing in this current economy, but I would have quite a stash of nickels though. On top of making the enemies dangerous to further encourage stealth, they're also kind of stupid. They may be placed in inconvenient spots, but one fully charged swing of your cane sword can easily put them out. The cane sword is by far and away the best weapon in the game. While we do get our hands on several other weapons, including a few firearms, this thing remains an invaluable weapon, mainly because of the fact that it takes up zero inventory space. While I do have a knack for complaining about inventory capacity in games like this, and this time will be no different, I can't really knock it, because like Fallen Aces, this game isn't done. While I did postulate about an inventory upgrade for episode 2 or 3 of Fallen Aces, this game would make more sense to have one, since it is very Resident Evil 4 inspired, for several factors we'll get to later on. Anyways, this thing occupies its own slot and thus remains useful for the entire game. Everything else, on the other hand, does take up inventory space, and quite a lot of it in fact. You only get 24 slots in this game, and even something as simple as a glass bottle takes up 2 of those slots. Ammo, healing items, valuable trinkets, all of these things take up space. There aren't as many things to carry around as in other games, but there are still more than a few things that serve very limited use. Like the aforementioned valuable trinkets. At this stage in the game, they serve no purpose and won't for several hours. So carrying them around is just a waste of space. Either way though, you're going to be clogged up with stuff for most of the game. If you want to carry a bunch of weapons, ammo to spare, and a healing item or two, you're probably not going to have the space to grab any loot you find. Despite the fact that this game seems to scream Resident Evil in some areas, there's also no item box, which is something that even on harder difficulties would make sense to have. Sure, you can drop items anywhere you want, which can be used to create little stockpiles of supplies in your phonographs, but if you want to use any of those supplies, you have to huff it over to that area very, very slowly. This can be tempered by a mechanic we'll talk about later on though. Anyways, the fisheries. This is the first area of the game, and like any good immersive sim should, it's a microcosm of the game's mechanics. There will still be plenty more to learn across the game, but there's still a pretty good slice of stuff here to get you acquainted with the game's mechanics. On top of the cane sword, you can get your hands on a few other weapons here, the most basic of which being the revolver. You'd think that giving the player a gun would kill any kind of tension in this game's already somewhat strained survival horror atmosphere, but that can't be further than the truth. Not only is ammunition rare, the revolver itself is also just weak. I'm not 100% sure there's any kind of location-based damage system, but from what I've experienced, it takes at least 3 shots to down a basic cultist. In reality, this thing is better used as a tool more so than a weapon. This thing can be easily used to destroy explosive barrels, which for obvious reasons are very powerful. Speaking of tools, the second weapon we can get here is the Undertaker pistol, which is located in a safe in this remote cave. If I had a nickel for every time an immersive sim used the code 415 to open a safe, I'd have 2 nickels. Wait, I already fucking made this joke. This thing is probably the game's most unique weapon. Instead of being some kind of directly dangerous firearm, it is almost directly stated to be a tool. It is completely silent and has 3 different ammo types to suit many purposes, the most basic of which being the baton round, a flexible rubber slug that does very little damage but can be used to knock out electrical lights from a distance. This makes them perfect for distracting enemies, allowing you to get an easy kill. The second and likely most useless ammo type on offer are the choke rounds, basically mini gas grenades that either snuff out non-electric light sources or stun non-human enemies. Although surprisingly the first of these uses is far more useful. Some enemies do carry torches, which do produce a pretty significant amount of light around them. So having something to snuff out fires is actually kind of useful. Still not as useful as the baton round or the last round on offer, the incendiary bolt, which is basically this game's BFG. These things can be absurdly powerful if applied properly, which would explain why they're so rare. Their use is pretty self-explanatory, but they have some interesting capabilities. If an enemy is lit on fire, they'll run around screaming like a moron, and there is a pretty good chance they'll light their friends on fire, which can lead to a cataclysmic series of events. Anyways, with some proper tools collected, we can escape the fisheries and head out into the next section, the cliffside. Well, not actually. We can't actually access most of the cliffside due to a path collapse, so we'll have to take a detour through the caves. And this is when the game tries to ratchet these spooks up to 11. The place is seemingly devoid of any kind of cultists, but no, the real problem here are the hounds. These guys are, I'm not a big fan, really. Design and concept-wise, I like them. In fact, I like the whole game design-wise. More on a bit. But in practice, yeah, miss me with this shit. They're faster than the cultists by a long shot, and I find their attack patterns a little less predictable and not in a good way. This makes the first half of the cave something that I had to spend way too goddamn long on. This is because of the fact that there's only one phonograph in this area, and it's near the very start. In concept, I like the idea of having fixed save points in a stealth game, but it just doesn't really work all that well in practice. Sure, I guess it does encourage the player to go with the flow and experiment due to the fact that you can't just quick save and quick load every 5 seconds. But when you die to fall damage halfway through an area after clearing all of the enemies out and have to go back 40 minutes, it's not very fun. That's probably just a skill issue on my part, but still, I didn't really care for the save system. If you are gonna play this game and you only do it once, I'd recommend doing it on this difficulty and just saving every time you come across a phonograph. There's no ranking system or penalty for saving every time you come across a phonograph in this build of the game, so just do it every time. It will definitely save you some headaches in an area, even if it feels kind of save scummy, which is something I really don't like doing. Regardless, this game does try to alleviate some of the darkness problems here by giving you a portable hand lantern, which is actually pretty useful, even if you can get spotted with it very quickly if you're carrying it around. Either way, I'm just gonna skip past most of this part because there are no other new mechanics introduced here. It's just a pretty straight shot between here and the elevator to the surface. I suppose now would be a good time to talk about this game's fantastic art direction. It looks lovingly retro, although not actually retro. It's kind of the way your brain remembers Thief looking if you haven't played it in 20 years. Speaking of Thief, the original 2 Thief games are obviously a major inspiration for this game, and that is an inspiration it wears on its sleeve, although that's more so in the second half of the game. This first half is very Lovecraft-inspired, most notably Shadow over Innsmouth, with all of the fish shenanigans and the bleak, dreary ocean aesthetic at night. Again, this side of the game is only really shown during the first slice of this build, although it's never truly lost, even in the more urban environments. The game does feature a pretty decent mix of environments too, with the bleak and dreary fisheries at the start leading to the caves and the cliffside before spitting us out near the city of Gloomwood itself. When it comes to gameplay though, I've seen this game described as Thief with guns, which is apt, but there's a more obvious comparison that I don't see as often. That being Resident Evil 4. I mean, it gets very close to this game at times. The attaché case inventory, only being able to save at phonographs, the entire idea of being sent to a rural town in what appears to be Europe only to be captured by the locals who have either formed a cult or been afflicted with some kind of curse or infection. Really, the signs are all there. Anyways, though I think I've rambled on for long enough, I just wanted to wax poetic about how goddamn good this game looks. Anyways, now that we're out of the caverns, the game picks back up in quality and never drops for the rest of the build. This next section is actually set on the cliffside, and no real notes here. We're still on a warpath to get to the lighthouse, which pits us up against a little bit of everything. The huntsmen have decided to start deploying bear traps, which themselves can be picked up and used as a weapon. Well, they're more of a trap than a direct weapon, but still. I only ever used them once, and talking about that here would be technically spoilers, so I'll hold that off. Really, this entire section can be glossed over, so I'll just skip to when we can reach my favorite part of the game, and probably its high watermark, the Slaughtered Goat Tavern. Right off the bat, we can see that things, aren't that great here. The place is devoid of life, and the only other sign of human involvement here is the bunch of corpses dotted around the place. We can also get our hands on the flash bomb here. Basically a Thief 2 stun grenade, although redesigned to fit the late 19th century aesthetic. The nature of these things being incredibly rare means that I barely ever use them. Upstairs in the tavern's main floor, however, is where things finally pick up. Yeah, you know what, I think I'm good. This is the Goat Man, which is currently the closest thing that this game has to a boss fight at the time of writing this script. You could technically avoid fighting him if you're sneaky enough. You need this key on his back so you can access a door that leads to the city gate properly. And with some practice and patience, you could probably grab it without having to even kill him. But still, the most fun way to deal with this problem is just to kill him. He's the only enemy in this entire level, and he makes up for it by being the most dangerous enemy in the game. He's incredibly privy to hearing any little noise you make, and he's also expectedly tanky. Remember how I said that the incendiary round for the Undertaker pistol is basically this game's BFG? Even these things won't save you here. He can take several of those to the face without even dying, so charbroiling this asshole really isn't an option. You could theoretically shoot him if you had enough ammo, which would be a devastating waste, but it is possible. This is actually further helped due to the addition of the final new weapon in this build of the game, the shotgun, which is actually really, really good. If you just absolutely have to put someone in the ground, this is the tool for the job. It even conveniently folds to take up less inventory space, although it still takes up the most out of any weapon in the game. Even still though, the Goatman can tank several boxes of shells before going down, so this also isn't advised. You really do have to think outside the box here. Pro tip, if you can find the secret switch on the second floor here, you can get into the attic. You can find both some extra loot as well as an explosive barrel. By positioning this explosive barrel at the top of the stairs and then placing a bunch of bear traps around the room, you can turn this place into a giant trap to own zone the goat man. When he dies, he'll drop his horns as an extra loot item. Well, he might for you. Since he died to fire damage in my playthrough, he turned into a pile of ashes and didn't drop anything. Well, besides the key that we need to actually leave this area. Also, I didn't mention it before, but you can technically skip this area. By doing a little bit of parkour, you can completely circumnavigate this entire building, although that's probably not intended by the devs, since this area has a bunch of interesting content in it. Maybe it'll be helpful for speedruns, I don't know. With the goat man dead, this area turns into a proper safe space. You can freely loot and plunder this place to your heart's content. I also turned this area into another little loot drop-off point after bringing all of my goods here, but this only lasted until I managed to reach the lighthouse. Speaking of the lighthouse, we're not far. In fact, within 5 minutes of starting the next recording, I make it there. The place is dead, but we do find a note left by the stranger telling us to listen to a message on the phonograph.
If you're reading this, that means you made it safely to the lighthouse.
Yeah, barely.
My store is in the market district. It's not far from here.
Really? Because this lighthouse wasn't far, and it still took me hours to reach. Frankly, I'm surprised I managed to make it here in one piece at all. To make a long story short, we have to find this guy at his shop in the market district. He bookends his message by telling us not to look in the mirror in the basement, which, okay, whatever. Ah, I see my buddy Dr. Frankenstein hook you up with some equipment. Anyways, let's go look in that mirror.
Hello, Doctor.
I'm sorry, who are you? This lady is the Countess, who offers to get us out of here if we can make it to the Market Plaza before midnight. But we'll just have to wait and see if that pans out. For right now, though, we take this secret elevator down and head in the direction of the main city gates. The main gates are guarded by a butt-fucking giant number of huntsmen, so going in that way isn't a great idea.
The outsider, fire the cannon!
The best way to go in is through the sewers. Well, kinda, sorta sewers. There's an entire fisherman shantytown down here, which is pretty nice, and it gives me an opportunity to talk about this area's new enemy, the Bat Barbers. They're a mix between the hounds and the huntsmen. They're a bit faster than the huntsmen, and they often roam in packs like the hounds. They're a little less tanky, but even then the best way to take them down is just by shooting them with a shotgun a single time. Shells for this thing do become rather scarce, due to the fact that they are the best way to take down almost any enemy in the game. Anyways, the Market District is, stylistically anyway, my favorite area in the game. While I do like the one-on-one close-quartered nature of the slaughtered goat, this place is just so nice looking. Hits that perfect low-poly cityscape aesthetic that administers dopamine directly into my brain. The main goal here is obviously to get to the merchant's shop, but to do so we need to go into the barber shop to get a MacGuffin, and yeah, that's not happening. This place had me stumped for a little while until I remembered that a nearby gun store had a bunch of convenient explosive barrels openly displayed in the main room. This makes laying a real nasty trap easy. Also, if you hit a barrel a few times with a sword, then it goes down to being a one-shot with a revolver. Normally it takes two, which is just a waste of ammo. Anyways, with the emerald key collected, we can unlock the main gate into the upper level of the market district. This spits us out right in front of the merchant's store, the Emerald Eye. So we finally meet face to face. He's a little upset that we decided to speak to the Countess back at the lighthouse, but it's not a huge deal. He says that she's to blame for this city going to shit, and considering her magic ability to speak through mirrors and shit, I'm inclined to agree with him. He says that if we can get to her manor, we might be able to reverse this said shit, and, you know, that seems like a good idea, so that's what we're off to do next. One small problem, though.
Now your first task is collecting the stone seals that will give you passage through the old city gate to the mountains around her manor.
That sounds familiar. The first one we can find is in the mountains surrounding the manor, but to get there we need to go through the underport first, which the merchant just so happens to have a key for. Anyways, this is the first time in the game where we're given a proper safe space. We get our own little room with a phonograph and a safe even, it's pretty nice. The merchant, being a man of many wares, also gives us access to buy things from his shop. Since I've been hoarding valuables throughout the entire game thus far, I can buy pretty much everything in the store, including the monocle, which is basically the zoom eye from Thief 2, although not as good because it doesn't amplify sound. Then again, that may have been more of a bug than a feature in that game, but I digress. Anyways, on to the underport, which is, spoiler alert, the last area currently playable in this build of the game. Okay, well, not off to the underport just yet, as there's one thing that I want to touch on before we leave the Emerald Eye. The Countess contacts us from a mirror in the attic, but before we can actually reach her, she leaves. Somehow, I don't know, she has magic bullshit, as we've previously mentioned. The important thing is that this unlocks the game's fast travel system, which isn't really fast travel per se, but it's still pretty fast compared to just walking everywhere. If you enter certain mirrors found across the game, you can go into this little pocket dimension, which allows you to travel to other mirrors you've previously discovered, which significantly cuts down on the amount of backtracking time you'll have to take. It's just a shame that it's introduced so late into the game. Anyways, the Underport. This is like the culmination of everything the game is built up to at this point. There's armored huntsmen, hounds, even a new enemy that we'll talk about in a bit. But even then, the game still has a ton of stuff to introduce. Like the watchdogs, which are another thing ripped out of a Thief game. Even the fact that this first one is easy as hell to deactivate is ripped out of that game, although that may just be a coincidence. The main goal here is to get the power back on so we can get into this asshole's office, which has some shit. I don't really know. I didn't pay attention here because I'd been playing for like fucking 5 hours. To get to the Lamplight power station, we have to take the sewers, and this time it is very obviously the sewers. All across the level, though, we've been getting glimpses of a new threat present here, although it only decides to show its face here. The Crowmen. These things are properly dangerous. At least in theory. I didn't get hit by a single one. That's because the best way to deal with them is just to hit them with the 1-2 punch. Shotgun, then revolver to finish them off. And this does finally give me a reason to chip into my nearly endless supply of revolver ammo. With the way to the power station cleared, we can finally get there only to find more bat barbers nesting in the roof. Which is probably not good. Just gotta carefully navigate my way through this one and oh, for fuck's sake. Thankfully, a gaggle of huntsmen walk in to see what all the ruckus is, and they forget to close the door behind them, so yeah, they're getting locked in there with the bats. Now it's just a matter of huffing it back to the shipping warehouse to get into that office. The place is nice, very posh, one of the few cozy areas in the game, in fact. Like all corrupt business people, the boss man here has a secret button under his desk that leads to the end of this build of the game. Bit of an anticlimax, I know. You can keep playing if you really want to, presumably to squeeze out every last drop of content in the game, but for the sake of this video, this is where I'll be ending things. Overall, I had a really fun time with this one. Despite my grievances with one section of the game, what is here is very highly polished, and honestly, by the time I reached the end, I really did want more. It's got that perfect spooky vibe. It's so nice. I don't know what else to say about it. After the speed hump in the caves, everything just kind of comes together to make a genuinely enjoyable experience. If you've got 20 bucks to burn, I'd say this game is well worth it. Really, both of these games are. I am super stoked to see where both of these games are going to go from here. Fallen Aces has a really solid foundation, with some good building to do in the future, and Gloomwood is already built on its foundation very well. Now it's just a matter of waiting for them to finish the fucking game. Anyways, next month is Spooky Month, so it should be time for something properly spooky.